Welcome, dear dreamer, to a tale spun from the dusty corners of castle walls and the hush of moonlit gardens. Tonight, we drift gently into the secret chambers of medieval queens, not the ones embroidered in textbooks, but the ones embroidered in longing, laughter, and the occasional misplaced slipper. This is not a tale of war or conquest. No, tonight we tiptoe past the throne and into the boudoir, where queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine, Isabella of France, and Margaret of Anjou exchanged more than political alliances. They exchanged glances, letters, and sometimes, if the stars aligned, kisses that history tried to forget. But before we tiptoe into scandal and satin sheets, go ahead and hit that like button like a lovesick knight tapping on a queen's window. Subscribe if you're ready for more sleepy drama than a royal banquet with no dessert. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from so I know which kingdom to send the next bedtime scroll to. Bonus points if you're watching from a castle or a couch that feels like one. Now, fluff your pillow, dim the lights, and let's begin. Once upon a yawn, in a castle that smelled faintly of rosemary and rebellion, lived a queen named Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was clever, charming, and had more husbands than most people had spoons. But tonight, we're not here for politics. We're here for parchment, poetry, and a wink that changed history. Sort of. Eleanor had a secret, not the kind that involved daggers or dungeons. No, her secret was softer. It wore silk slippers and wrote sonnets by candlelight. His name was Bernard, a troubadour with a lute, a limp, and a love for metaphors that made absolutely no sense. Bernard once wrote, "Thy eyes are like two sleepy moons, orbiting my heart's potato." Eleanor swooned, or maybe she sneezed. Historians disagree. Their love bloomed in the garden behind the castle, where roses grew and guards pretended not to notice. They exchanged letters, hidden inside hollowed-out loaves of bread. One loaf was accidentally eaten by a horse named Geoffrey. Geoffrey was later knighted for his service to romance. Eleanor's ladies-in-waiting were suspicious. Why does Her Majesty hum every time Bernard walks by? One asked. And why is she suddenly interested in lute maintenance? Another whispered. But Eleanor was discreet. She disguised her love notes as shopping lists. One read, 3 turnips, 1 bolt of velvet, eternal devotion to Bernard goat cheese. No one questioned it. Goat cheese was very popular that year. Their rendezvous were sleepy affairs. They met under moonlight, spoke in hushed tones, and once fell asleep mid-embrace. Bernard snored like a gentle breeze through parchment. Eleanor dreamed of a world where queens could love freely, and where Bernard learned to rhyme something with Aquitaine. But alas, the world was not ready. Their affair faded like ink on old scrolls. Bernard was sent away to write songs for someone less royal. Eleanor returned to her throne, her crown, and her goat cheese. Still, on quiet nights, she'd sit by the window, look at the stars, and hum a tune that sounded suspiciously like Bernard's potato poem. And somewhere, in a dusty library, a scroll remains. It reads, "To my queen, whose heart is a sleepy fortress, and whose love is the softest rebellion, in the chilly corridors of a stone castle, where tapestries swayed like sleepy ghosts, and the fireplaces crackled with mild enthusiasm, lived Queen Isabella of France. History remembers her as the she-wolf, but tonight we remember her as the woman who fell in love with a man who wore too much velvet and whispered like a breeze through a feather pillow. His name was Roger Mortimer, a nobleman, a schemer, and, most importantly, a man who could tiptoe so quietly that even the mice applauded. Their romance began not with fireworks, but with a shared sigh during a particularly boring banquet. The roast was dry, the speeches were drier, but their glances, positively moist with intrigue. Isabella and Roger communicated through the castle walls, not with magic, just with very thin stone and a lot of whispering. One night, Isabella whispered, "Meet me by the tapestry with the confused unicorn." Roger replied, "Which one?" "There are three." They met by all three, just to be safe. Their love was subtle. No dramatic declarations. No stolen kisses in the rain. Mostly, they exchanged notes disguised as tax documents. One read, "Increase grain storage, reduce candle budget." Roger's eyes are like sleepy puddles. "Consider new moat policy." The guards were baffled. "Why does the queen keep smiling at the moat?" one asked. "And why is Roger always near the confused unicorn?" another wondered. But no one dared question Isabella. She once stared down a bishop for sneezing too loudly. Their secret meetings were held in the castle's least popular room, the room of mild regret. It was cold, damp, and featured a portrait of a man who looked like he'd just lost a chess game and his lunch. But it was quiet, and quiet was romantic. One night, Roger brought Isabella a gift, a velvet pouch filled with dried lavender and a tiny spoon. "For your dreams," he said, "and your soup." Isabella laughed so softly, the walls blushed. But as all sleepy romances go, theirs was interrupted by politics, paperwork, and one very nosy monk. Roger was sent away. Isabella returned to ruling, sighing, and occasionally visiting the room of mild regret just to remember. Still, the walls remembered, and if you listen closely, you might hear a whisper, "Meet me by the unicorn." Bring soup in a castle where the wind played chess with the curtains and the candles flickered like they were gossiping. Queen Margaret of Anjou sat in her chamber, staring at a chessboard. Not because she loved the game, no, because her secret lover, Thomas the Messenger, had once said, "Every move I make is for you," and then promptly lost to a pawn. Thomas wasn't particularly good at chess, or messaging really. He once delivered a scroll to the wrong queen and accidentally started a knitting club in Wales. But Margaret adored him. He had kind eyes, a gentle voice, and a way of tripping over rugs that made her giggle, like a schoolgirl in a tiara. Their romance began with a game. Margaret moved her knight. Thomas moved his bishop. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Thomas knocked over a goblet. It was love. They played in secret in the castle's quietest room, the chamber of strategic silence. It was so silent, even the mice wore slippers. Their games lasted hours, days. Once, a match stretched into 3 weeks. No one won. Everyone napped. Margaret used chess pieces to send messages. The queen meant, "I miss you." The rook meant, "Meet me by the tapestry with the sleepy lion." The pawn meant, "Bring snacks." Thomas once misread the board and brought a goose. The goose was later knighted. Its name was Sir Honk. Their love was slow, like molasses in winter. They exchanged glances over pawns, sighs over bishops, and once, a kiss behind a rook. It was a quiet kiss, the kind that makes history yawn and say, "Well, that's sweet." But politics loomed. Margaret had duties, Thomas had scrolls, and the goose had ambitions. Their meetings grew shorter, their chess games sleepier. One day, Thomas left a note under the board. "My queen, you are my checkmate. Forever and softly, Margaret smiled, moved her knight, and whispered, "Your move." And somewhere, in a dusty castle, a chessboard still sits. The pieces are mid-game. The queen is smiling. The goose is watching. In a castle where the wind had opinions and the pantry had secrets, Queen Joan of Navarre found herself tangled in a romance that began with a sock. Not a fancy sock, not even a clean sock, just a sock, woolen, slightly damp, and hanging mysteriously from her balcony. It was a signal, or so she hoped. Joan had read somewhere, probably in a scroll titled Subtle Seduction for Sovereigns, that leaving a sock out was a sign of longing, or laundry. The interpretation was flexible, but her secret admirer, a knight named Edmund, took it very seriously. Edmund saw the sock and panicked. "She wants poultry," he whispered, clearly, "a goose." And so, under moonlight and mild confusion, he delivered a goose to the queen's chambers. The goose honked once, pooped twice, and was promptly named Sir Feathers. Joan was baffled. "I was hoping for a poem," she said, "or at least a snack." But Edmund was persistent. The next night, he sent a slipper, then a lute, then a scroll that read, "My lady, your sock speaks louder than words. I am yours, feathered and confused." Their love blossomed in the pantry. It was the only place they could meet without suspicion, and it smelled like cinnamon and secrets. They sat among sacks of flour, whispering sweet nothings, and occasionally sneezing. One night, Edmund brought her a turnip, carved into the shape of a heart. It was lumpy. She adored it. The castle staff began to notice. "Why is the queen always near the oats?" one asked. "And why is there a goose in the throne room?" another wondered. But Joan was clever. She claimed she was conducting a royal grain inspection and goose diplomacy. Their romance was sleepy, soft, and slightly itchy, thanks to the sock. They never kissed in public. They never danced at feasts. But once, they held hands behind a barrel of pickles. It was magical and slightly briny. Eventually, the sock was retired. It was framed and hung in the pantry with a plaque that read, "Love begins with wool." Sir Feathers lived a long, honking life. Edmund became the royal sock advisor. And Joan? She ruled with grace, giggles, and a pantry full of memories. In a castle where the walls wore blankets and the floors creaked like sleepy knees, Queen Matilda of Flanders had a secret hobby: embroidery. Not just any embroidery, coded embroidery. Her tapestries didn't just tell stories. They whispered secrets, mostly romantic ones, occasionally snack-related. Matilda was clever. She stitched messages into her tapestries using thread colors, patterns, and the occasional hidden goose. One tapestry showed a knight kneeling before a queen. But if you looked closely, his sword was actually a spoon. This meant, "Meet me in the pantry." Her lover, a court tailor named Hugo, was the only one who understood her thread thoughts. He'd stare at her latest work and say things like, "Ah, the blue swirl means longing," or indigestion. He wasn't always accurate, but he was enthusiastic. One day, Matilda stitched a tapestry of a unicorn eating grapes under a crescent moon. Hugo interpreted it as, "I desire you under moonlight. Bring fruit." He arrived with raisins. Close enough. Their love was quiet, woven between royal duties and fabric scraps. They met in the sewing room, surrounded by needles, thimbles, and one very judgmental cat named Duchess. Duchess once sat on a tapestry depicting Hugo shirtless. She was never invited back. The castle staff grew suspicious. "Why does the queen keep stitching spoons?" one asked. "And why is Hugo always near the grape basket?" another wondered. But Matilda was discreet. She claimed she was working on a piece titled "The Culinary Majesty of Flanders." No one questioned it. The grapes were embroidered beautifully. One tapestry, meant to say, "I miss you," accidentally resembled a recipe for turnip stew. The royal chef made it. It was edible. Hugo ate it with a smile and said, "Your love tastes rooty." Matilda blushed. The chef cried. Eventually, their romance faded like old thread. Hugo was sent to tailor for a duke, with no sense of humor. Matilda stitched one final tapestry. A queen holding a spoon, standing beside a unicorn, under a moon made of raisins. It was hung in the castle's quietest hallway. Visitors often said, "What a strange stew recipe." But Matilda knew, and so did Hugo. In the misty hills of Toulouse, where the fog wore slippers and the trees whispered bedtime gossip, Queen Adelaide had a secret, not a scandalous one, not even a spicy one, just fluffy. Her secret lover was a falconer named Lucian. He had strong arms, gentle eyes, and a tendency to name every bird Kevin. But Lucian's greatest gift wasn't his falconry. It was a stuffed falcon he stitched together from leftover velvet and misplaced feathers. He called it Sir Fluff. Sir Fluff was magnificent. He had one eye, a button, two wings, slightly uneven, and a beak that looked suspiciously like a spoon. Adelaide adored him. She kept him on her pillow, whispered secrets into his fluff, and once tried to knight him with a breadstick. Their romance began with feathers. Lucien delivered a falcon to the queen's garden. The falcon flew away immediately. Lucien apologized by handing her Sir Fluff. "He doesn't fly," he said, "but he listens." Adelaide hugged him. The falcon, then Lucien, then a tree. She was very affectionate. They met in the aviary, surrounded by birds who judged them silently. One owl blinked disapprovingly. A pigeon coughed. But Adelaide and Lucien didn't care. They sat on hay bales, shared sleepy stories, and once fell asleep mid-conversation. Sir Fluff was their pillow. He was also their chaperone. The castle staff grew curious. "Why is the queen always in the bird room?" one asked. "And why is she cuddling a spoon?" another wondered. But Adelaide was clever. She claimed she was conducting a royal study on feather psychology. No one questioned it. The pigeons looked very emotional. One night, Lucien gave her a scroll. It read, "My queen, your heart is softer than fluff, and your love flies higher than Kevin." Adelaide cried, then laughed, then sneezed. The falcon sneezed too. It was a magical moment. Eventually, Lucien was sent to train falcons for a duke who preferred ducks. Adelaide kept Sir Fluff. She stitched him a tiny crown and placed him on the throne during meetings. No one dared move him. He was royalty now, and somewhere in a quiet aviary, a velvet falcon still sits. His button eye twinkles, his spoon beak shines, and his fluff, legendary, in a castle where scrolls outnumbered spoons and the air smelled faintly of parchment and pickles. Queen Beatrice of Provence had a habit. She wrote love letters in Latin, not because she was fluent, she wasn't, but because it made everything sound more romantic, or mysterious, or mildly threatening. Her secret admirer, Sir Roland of the slightly bent helmet, was a knight with strong shoulders, a soft heart, and absolutely no understanding of Latin. He once mistook amor vincit omnia for bring me onions. So he did. A whole basket. Beatrice was confused. Roland was proud. The onions were delicious. Their romance bloomed through miscommunication. Beatrice wrote, Carpe diem, mi amor. Roland read, Carpet demon, my love. He arrived with a rug and a sword. She laughed so hard she snorted. The snort echoed through the halls, and was later recorded in a scroll titled Royal Noises, Volume 2. They exchanged letters daily. Beatrice wrote in elegant script. Roland replied with drawings. One featured a stick figure queen, holding a sword and a turnip. It was labeled, You. She framed it. Their meetings were quiet, held in the castle's library, where the books were dusty and the chairs were judgmental. They sat between shelves, labeled Advanced Latin and Vegetable Identification. Once, Roland tried to impress her by reading aloud. He accidentally summoned a monk. The monk stayed for tea. The castle staff grew curious. Why is the queen always giggling near the onions? One asked. And why is Sir Roland carrying a Latin dictionary and a carrot? Another wondered. But Beatrice was clever. She claimed she was researching ancient salad recipes. No one questioned it. The carrot was very scholarly. One day, Beatrice wrote, Tu es lux in tenebris. Roland translated, You are a lukewarm turnip. He blushed. She kissed his cheek. The turnip was honored. Eventually, Roland was sent to guard a bridge that no one used. Beatrice sent him letters daily, in Latin. He replied with onions. Their love endured, through vegetables, vowels, and very confused monks. And somewhere, in a quiet library, a scroll remains. It reads, Amor vincit omnia. Also, bring snacks, in a castle surrounded by a moat that smelled faintly of frogs and forgotten promises. Queen Elspeth of Aragon believed in the stars, not just for navigation, but for romance. She once said, If Orion twinkles, I shall flirt. If Cassiopeia flickers, I shall swoon. If the moon is full, I shall nap. Her secret admirer, a stargazing stable boy named Milo, shared her celestial obsession. He wore a cloak embroidered with constellations and once tried to name a horse Nebula. The horse disagreed. They compromised on Steve. Their love began under moonlight. Elspeth wandered the castle gardens, clutching a scroll titled Romance According to Astronomy. Milo appeared from the shadows, holding a telescope and a sandwich. I saw Venus, he whispered, and also a raccoon. Elspeth was intrigued. They met by the moat, where frogs croaked lullabies, and the water reflected the stars like sleepy glitter. Their conversations were soft, poetic, and occasionally interrupted by splashes. One night, Milo fell in. Elspeth rescued him with a fishing net and a giggle. To communicate, they used star charts. One chart meant, I miss you. Another meant, meet me by the sleepy willow. A third meant, bring snacks. Milo once misread a chart and brought a duck. The duck was later promoted to Royal Aquatic Companion. The castle staff grew suspicious. Why is the queen always staring at the sky? One asked. And why is Milo wet? Another wondered. But Elspeth was clever. She claimed she was conducting lunar diplomacy. No one questioned it. The duck wore a tiny crown. Their romance was gentle. They held hands under constellations, whispered dreams into the wind, and once tried to kiss during a meteor shower. A frog interrupted. It was very dramatic. Eventually, Milo was sent to chart stars for a duke who preferred clouds. Elspeth watched the sky every night, searching for a twinkle that meant, I'm still yours. She found it. It was shaped like a spoon. She cried, then laughed, then napped, and somewhere, by a quiet moat, a duck still floats. The stars still shine, and the frogs still sing sleepy songs of love. In a castle where the wind hummed lullabies and the guards blinked in slow motion, Queen Isolde of Brittany had a secret admirer with a musical heart and questionable rhythm. His name was Percival, a bard with a lute, a limp, and a voice that sounded like a goose trying to sing opera underwater. Their romance began with a serenade. Percival stood beneath her window, strumming his lute and singing, "Oh, Isolde, your eyes are like soup, warm and mysterious, with croutons of truth." Isolde was enchanted, or confused, possibly both. She leaned out and whispered, "Do you take requests?" He nodded. She asked for silence. He played louder. The guards were baffled. "Is that music?" one asked. "Or a very emotional squirrel?" Another wondered. But Isolde was smitten. She invited Percival to perform in the royal garden, where the roses wilted slightly out of embarrassment. Their meetings were musical. Percival composed songs with titles like Ballad of the Blinking Queen and Ode to Her Majesty, S left elbow. Isolde clapped politely. Once, she laughed so hard, she snorted. The snort echoed through the castle and was mistaken for a battle cry. The knights mobilized. Percival apologized with a lullaby. One night, he played a tune so sleepy, the guards fell asleep, standing up. A pigeon took over watch duty. It was later promoted. Isolde called the song the nap anthem. It became a royal bedtime tradition. To communicate, they used musical notes. A high C meant, "I miss you." A low G meant, "Meet me by the sleepy fountain." A D sharp meant, "Bring cheese." Percival once misplayed a chord and accidentally proposed. Isolde accepted, then realized he meant to ask for a blanket. The castle staff grew curious. "Why is the queen always humming?" one asked. "And why is Percival carrying a wheel of cheese?" Another wondered. But Isolde was clever. She claimed she was researching sonic diplomacy. No one questioned it. The cheese was very diplomatic. Eventually, Percival was sent to perform for a duke who preferred silence. Isolde kept his lute. She strummed it every night, softly, sleepily, and slightly off-key. The pigeon nodded in approval, and somewhere, in a quiet garden, a lute still rests. Its strings hum with longing. Its wood smells of cheese, and its songs, perfect for naps in a castle where the ivy grew like gossip and the fountains burbled like sleepy toddlers. Queen Rosalind of Castile had a problem. She was in love, and the only way to communicate with her secret admirer was through coughing. It started innocently. One day, while strolling through the courtyard, Rosalind coughed delicately. Sir Alaric, a knight with a jawline like a bookshelf and a heart full of poetry, coughed back. It wasn't romantic. It was allergy season. But something clicked. From that moment on, they developed a code. One cough meant, "Hello." 2 coughs meant, "I adore you." 3 coughs meant, "Meet me by the sleepy statue." 4 coughs meant, "Bring snacks." 5 coughs meant, "Oops, wrong person." It was subtle. It was strange. It was sneeze-prone. Their love blossomed in the courtyard, where pigeons waddled suspiciously and gardeners wore earplugs. They sat on opposite benches, coughing softly, occasionally throwing in a hiccup for flair. One day, Alaric sneezed so dramatically, Rosalind fainted. It was romantic and mildly concerning. To avoid suspicion, they disguised their coughs as royal health rituals. The queen is practicing respiratory diplomacy, one advisor said. Sir Alaric is developing a new nightly breathing technique, another claimed. No one questioned it. Everyone wore scarves. Their secret meetings were filled with sniffles, giggles, and one very confused goose. The goose tried to join the conversation. It honked 3 times. Alaric brought snacks. The goose was thrilled. One night, Rosalind left a scroll under a bench. It read, "My night, your cough is my lullaby, your sneeze, my symphony, your hiccup, confusing but endearing." Alaric replied with a bouquet of herbs and a note that said, "I cough for you." She cried, then coughed, then laughed, then coughed again. Eventually, Alaric was sent to guard a tower with excellent ventilation. Rosalind continued her courtyard strolls, coughing softly, hoping the wind would carry her love across the kingdom. And somewhere, in a quiet courtyard, a goose still honks, a statue still sleeps, and the echoes of love still sound like seasonal allergies. In a castle, where the clocks ticked like yawns and the tapestries looked perpetually sleepy, Queen Celestine of Bohemia made a bold decree: mandatory naps for everyone, not just for children, not just for cats, for knights, scribes, and even the royal goose. His name was Sir Doze. But the real reason behind this dreamy law? A secret romance with Sir Hugo, the royal mapmaker, who once fell asleep during a geography lecture and woke up with a crown on his head. Celestine was enchanted. "He dreams in topography," she whispered. Their love was built on naps. They met in the royal nap chamber, a room filled with cushions, soft music, and one very judgmental owl named Maurice. Maurice blinked slowly and disapproved of cuddling. They cuddled anyway. To communicate, they used nap schedules. A 2 p.m. nap meant, "I miss you." A 3:30 nap meant, "Meet me behind the sleepy bookshelf." A 4:15 nap meant, "Bring snacks." A surprise nap meant, "I love you." A snore meant, "I'm yours." A double snore meant, "I'm yours," but also dreaming about soup. Their romance was so sleepy, productivity in the castle dropped by 73%. The royal blacksmith forged a pillow instead of a sword. The royal chef made soup, then fell asleep in it. The goose took over scheduling. He was very organized. One day, Hugo gave Celestine a scroll. It read, "My queen, your heart is my hammock. Your love, my lullaby. Your snore, my destiny." She cried, then napped, then cried again, softly, into a velvet cushion. The castle staff grew curious. "Why is everyone horizontal?" one asked. "And why is the queen always hugging a map?" Another wondered. But Celestine was clever. She claimed she was testing horizontal diplomacy. No one questioned it. The goose wore spectacles. Eventually, Hugo was sent to chart nap zones for a duke who preferred jogging. Celestine kept his pillow. She napped with it daily, dreaming of maps, love, and soup. And somewhere, in a quiet chamber, Maurice still blinks, the goose still schedules, and the pillows still whisper stories of sleepy love. In a castle where the chandeliers swayed like they were dancing to lullabies, and the royal fruit bowl had its own guard, Queen Arabella of Burgundy found herself in the middle of a scandal so mild it was almost relaxing. It all began with a gooseberry. Arabella had a secret admirer, Lord Thistlewick of the slightly crooked hat. He was charming, poetic, and deeply committed to fruit-based courtship. One day, he sent her a basket of gooseberries with a note that read, "For your lips, sweeter than summer's sigh." Also, these were on sale. Arabella was touched. She adored gooseberries. She also adored Thistlewick's handwriting, which looked like a sleepy squirrel had dipped its tail in ink. She sent back a basket of plums and a scroll that said, "Your hat is crooked. I find it irresistible." Their fruity flirtation escalated. Strawberries meant, "I miss you." Cherries meant, "Meet me by the sleepy fountain." Gooseberries meant, "I love you." Bananas meant, "You're being dramatic." One day, Thistlewick sent a basket so large it required 3 donkeys and a confused monk. Inside were gooseberries, cherries, and one very nervous pineapple. The pineapple was not part of the code. Arabella panicked. She sent a scroll that read, "Is this a declaration of war?" Unfortunately, the scroll was intercepted by a neighboring duke with a pineapple allergy. He declared war immediately. The conflict lasted 3 days and involved a lot of sneezing. Arabella apologized with a basket of pears and a handwritten note. Oops. Despite the fruit fallout, her romance with Thistlewick endured. They met in the orchard, beneath trees that whispered gossip, and occasionally dropped apples on their heads. They held hands, shared gooseberries, and once kissed behind a plum bush. It was soft and slightly sticky. The castle staff grew curious. "Why is the queen always near the fruit?" one asked. "And why is Lord Thistlewick wearing a pineapple on his belt?" Another wondered, but Arabella was clever. She claimed she was developing a royal fruit taxonomy. No one questioned it. The pineapple wore a tiny cape. Eventually, Thistlewick was sent to negotiate peace with the pineapple duke. Arabella waited, sending him baskets labeled, "Not war." He returned with a treaty, a pineapple pie, and a new hat, still crooked, and somewhere, in a quiet orchard, a plum bush still rustles, a pineapple still wears a cape, and love still tastes like gooseberries. In a castle where the bread rose with dignity and the flour floated like sleepy snowflakes, Queen Sabina of Sicily found love not in the ballroom nor the garden, but in the pantry. Yes, the pantry, the kingdom's most romantic room if you ignored the pickles. Her secret admirer was Tobias, the royal baker's apprentice. He had flour in his hair, cinnamon on his sleeves, and a smile that made Sabina forget how to queen properly. Their first meeting was accidental. She wandered in looking for figs. He was asleep in a barrel of oats. She screamed. He apologized. The oats were never the same. From that moment on, the pantry became their haven. The sack of sugar meant, "I miss you." The jar of honey meant, "Meet me behind the sleepy spice rack." The cinnamon sticks meant, "Bring snacks." The pickles meant, "Not today." They whispered sweet nothings between shelves of lentils and jars of jam. Once, Tobias carved a heart into a wheel of cheese. Sabina cried, then ate it. It was romantic and slightly tangy. One day, they tried to hide in a barrel of oats together. It was cozy. It was itchy. It was a mistake. The royal oat inspector found them and declared, "This is not oat protocol." Sabina knighted him for discretion. He retired immediately. The castle staff grew curious. "Why is the queen always smelling like cinnamon?" one asked. "And why is Tobias covered in jam?" Another wondered. But Sabina was clever. She claimed she was conducting a royal grain audit. No one questioned it. The pickles were very persuasive. Their love was soft, like freshly baked bread. They held hands behind flour sacks, exchanged scrolls hidden in baguettes, and once kissed beside a barrel labeled "emergency raisins." It was magical and slightly wrinkly. Eventually, Tobias was sent to bake for a duke who preferred toast. Sabina kept a loaf he made just for her. It was shaped like a heart. It smelled like love. It was slightly overcooked. She adored it. And somewhere, in a quiet pantry, the oats still whisper, the pickles still judge, and the flour still remembers the soft steps of sleepy love. In a castle where the chandeliers blinked like sleepy stars, and the shadows tiptoed politely, Queen Mirabelle of Lorraine had a secret system for love. Candles. Not just for ambiance, not just for lighting, for communication. Romantic, waxy communication. Her secret admirer was Cedric, the royal cheese steward. He had a nose for Gouda, a heart full of brie, and a habit of arranging candles in suspiciously poetic patterns. One night, Mirabelle noticed 3 candles flickering in a triangle near the pantry. She gasped. It meant, I adore you. Also, bring crackers. Their candle code was elaborate. 1 candle meant, I miss you. 2 candles meant, meet me by the sleepy tapestry. 3 candles meant, the king is watching. 4 candles meant, bring cheese. 5 candles meant, emergency cuddle. They met in the candle cellar, a room filled with wax, warmth, and one very judgmental chandelier named Gerald. Gerald creaked disapprovingly whenever Cedric winked. He creaked constantly. Mirabelle once arranged candles in the shape of a heart. Cedric responded with a wheel of camembert carved into a swan. It melted slightly. She cried, then ate it. It was romantic and gooey. The castle staff grew curious. Why are candles appearing in odd places? One asked. And why is the queen always holding cheese? Another wondered. But Mirabelle was clever. She claimed she was conducting a royal wax census. No one questioned it. The candles were very cooperative. One night, Cedric left a scroll beside a flickering trio. It read, My queen, your flame lights my fondue. Your glow melts my heart. Your wax, slightly sticky, but enchanting. Mirabelle replied, with a candle shaped like a spoon and a note that said, You're my favorite snack. Cedric fainted. Gerald creaked dramatically. Eventually, Cedric was sent to curate cheese for a duke who preferred crackers. Mirabelle kept a candle he made just for her, scented with thyme, romance, and mild confusion. She lit it every night, watching the flame dance like a sleepy goose in love. And somewhere, in a quiet cellar, the candles still flicker, the cheese still whispers, and Gerald still creaks with judgment and affection. In a castle where the ink dried slower than gossip and the scribes snored in Latin, Queen Honoria of Savoy had a secret weapon for romance: boring scrolls. Not just mildly dull, painfully dull. So dull, they were practically invisible to anyone without a strong tolerance for footnotes. Her secret admirer was Erasmus, the royal archivist. He wore robes that smelled like old paper and once catalogued a sneeze. Honoria adored him, not for his looks. He resembled a startled quill, but for his ability to hide love letters inside the most tedious documents imaginable. One scroll was titled, On the Proper Storage of Turnips in Moist Climates. Hidden inside was a message, My queen, your smile is brighter than a well-ventilated cellar. Another scroll, The History of Medieval Sock Taxation, contained a poem, Thy love is like a sock, warm, stretchy, and occasionally mismatched. Their romance was a masterclass in monotony. A scroll about grain tariffs meant, I miss you. A scroll about candle wax regulations meant, meet me by the sleepy bookshelf. A scroll about goose migration patterns meant, bring snacks. A scroll about scrolls meant, I love you. They met in the archive chamber, a room so quiet even the dust tiptoed. They sat among stacks of unread scrolls, whispering sweet nothings and occasionally nodding off mid-sentence. Once, Honoria fell asleep on a scroll titled The Evolution of Medieval Stapling. She dreamed of Erasmus and paperclips. The castle staff grew suspicious. Why is the queen always in the archives? One asked. And why is Erasmus smiling at a scroll about turnips? Another wondered. But Honoria was clever. She claimed she was conducting a royal audit of parchment enthusiasm. No one questioned it. The scrolls were very enthusiastic. One day, Erasmus gave her a scroll so boring it was declared emotionally inert by the royal poet. Inside it read, "My queen, our love is a footnote in history, quiet, hidden, and absolutely essential." She cried, then yawned, then kissed him behind a shelf labeled miscellaneous boredom. Eventually, Erasmus was sent to archive for a duke who preferred oral storytelling. Honoria kept his scrolls, reading them nightly, drifting into dreams filled with turnips, socks, and sleepy declarations. And somewhere, in a quiet archive, a scroll still rests. Its title is dull, its contents are dreamy, and its love, timelessly tedious. In a castle where the lemons were suspiciously well guarded, and the sunlight had a habit of revealing secrets, Queen Isidora of Naples had a favorite trick: invisible ink, not for espionage, not for royal decrees, for love letters, romantic, citrus-powered love letters. Her secret admirer was Felix, the royal candle maker. He smelled faintly of wax and optimism, and once invented a candle that flickered in Morse code. It mostly spelled oops. Isidora was enchanted. Their romance began with a lemon. Felix handed her one with a wink and whispered, "For your ink and your tea." She squeezed it onto parchment, wrote a message, and held it to the fire. The words appeared, "Your smile melts wax. Also, I like your elbows." From then on, they exchanged invisible notes. Lemon ink meant, "I miss you." Vinegar ink meant, "Meet me by the sleepy tapestry." Onion ink meant, "Bring snacks." Ink that smelled like socks meant, "Emergency cuddle." They met in the candle chamber, surrounded by flickering flames, and one very judgmental wax sculpture named Sir Drip. Sir Drip frowned constantly. He was made that way. One day, Isidora wrote a love letter using lemon juice and hid it inside a scroll titled Royal Candle Safety Protocols. Unfortunately, the scroll was left near a sunny window. The message appeared. A scribe read it aloud during a staff meeting. It said, "Felix, your waxy heart is my flame. Your eyebrows are majestic. Let's kiss behind the pickle shelf." The room went silent. The pickle shelf blushed. Isidora coughed. Felix fainted. Sir Drip melted slightly. To cover the scandal, Isidora claimed it was a metaphor for candle diplomacy. Felix nodded vigorously. The staff applauded. The pickles were never the same. Eventually, Felix was sent to craft candles for a duke who preferred darkness. Isidora kept a lemon on her desk, squeezing it gently each night, writing invisible dreams, and watching them glow in firelight. And somewhere, in a quiet chamber, a wax sculpture still frowns, a lemon still waits, and love still flickers in secret ink. In a castle where the balconies were dramatic and the goats were surprisingly musical, Queen Lavinia of Asturias had a romantic plan, a midnight serenade. Not to perform it, heavens no, to receive it. She had a secret admirer, Sir Benedict of the slightly misbuttoned tunic, who had promised to sing beneath her window under the stars. It was going to be perfect. Moonlight, mandolin, maybe a gentle breeze. What Lavinia got instead was a goat. Sir Benedict, in his excitement, climbed the wrong balcony. Instead of Lavinia's chamber, he serenaded the royal goat pen. The goats were thrilled. One danced, another fainted. Lavinia, meanwhile, watched from her actual balcony, holding a goblet of sleepy cider, and wondering why her love song included so much bleeding. The lyrics were heartfelt, if slightly confused. Oh, Lavinia, your eyes are like lanterns, your soul like soup, your hooves. Wait. He paused. A goat licked his mandolin. He continued anyway. The castle staff woke up. Is the queen being serenaded by livestock? One asked. Is that goat harmonizing? Another wondered. But Lavinia was clever. She claimed it was a royal experiment in cross-species musical diplomacy. No one questioned it. The goat wore a bow tie. Eventually, Benedict realized his mistake. He climbed down, apologized profusely, and offered Lavinia a bouquet of hay. She laughed so hard she snorted. The snort echoed through the courtyard and was later recorded in a scroll titled Unexpected Royal Noises, Volume 3. Their romance continued, now with goats as chaperones. One goat meant, I miss you. 2 goats meant, meet me by the sleepy fountain. 3 goats meant, bring snacks. 4 goats meant, emergency cuddle. 5 goats meant, you've serenaded the wrong person again. They met in the garden, where goats grazed politely, and Benedict sang softly. Lavinia once joined in, humming a tune called Ballad of the Blushing Balcony. The goats provided backup vocals. It was magical and slightly grassy. Eventually, Benedict was sent to perform for a duke who preferred silence. Lavinia kept one of the serenading goats, Sir Nibble. He wore a crown made of daisies and occasionally hummed in his sleep. And somewhere, beneath a quiet balcony, a goat still sings, a queen still smiles, and love still echoes in bleats and ballads. In a castle where the tapestries whispered bedtime gossip and the guards tiptoed like polite elephants, Queen Clementine of Navarre had a secret hideaway, a blanket fort. Not just any blanket fort, a royal one. It had velvet walls, satin ceilings, and a moat made of pillows. It was the coziest rebellion in medieval history. Her secret admirer was Lionel, the royal librarian, who once built a tower of books, so tall it got its own weather system. Clementine adored him, not just for his knowledge of obscure scrolls, but for his ability to fold a blanket with the precision of a knight polishing his sword. Their love began with a sneeze. Clementine sneezed during a council meeting. Lionel handed her a blanket. She wrapped herself in it and declared, I am now in session. Of nap. The council applauded. The goose fainted. From that moment on, they met inside the blanket fort. 1 blanket meant, I miss you. 2 blankets meant, meet me by the sleepy bookshelf. 3 blankets meant, bring snacks. 4 blankets meant, emergency cuddle. 5 blankets meant, we're starting a revolution. But gently. Inside the fort, they read scrolls, shared dreams, and once built a miniature throne out of marshmallows. Clementine sat on it. It collapsed. She declared it a metaphor. Lionel wrote a poem titled Ode to the Squishy Throne. The castle staff grew curious. Why is the queen always under blankets? One asked. And why is Lionel carrying marshmallows? Another wondered. But Clementine was clever. She claimed she was conducting a royal study on textile diplomacy. No one questioned it. The marshmallows were very persuasive. One night, Lionel gave her a scroll wrapped in flannel. It read, My queen, your heart is my fortress, your love, my pillow, your blanket, my destiny, she cried, then built a second fort. It had a snack wing. Eventually, Lionel was sent to organize scrolls for a duke who preferred hammocks. Clementine kept the fort. She added fairy lights, a cheese drawer, and a portrait of Lionel made entirely of buttons. And somewhere, in a quiet chamber, the blankets still rustle, the marshmallows still squish, and love still hides in folds of velvet and dreams. In a castle where the gravy flowed like gossip and the bread rolls had opinions, Queen Seraphina of Toulouse hosted the most anticipated event of the season, the Royal Feast of Autumn. Nobles gathered, musicians tuned. The goose wore a bow tie, but Seraphina had a secret agenda, hidden in the menu. Her secret admirer was Marcel, the royal menu scribe. He had a quill that tickled when he wrote, and a habit of naming dishes after emotions. One year, he served melancholy mushrooms and flirtatious fig tart. Seraphina was intrigued, also slightly hungry. Their romance was cooked slowly, like a stew of subtle glances and coded courses. Soup meant, I miss you. Salad meant, meet me by the sleepy tapestry. Roast duck meant, bring snacks. Dessert meant, I love you. Pickled turnips meant, let's never speak of this again. At the feast, Seraphina scanned the menu. It read, starter, longing, leek bisque. Main, passionate parsnip. Pie, dessert, devotion and custard. She blushed. Marcel winked. The goose honked in approval. Each dish was a message. The peas were arranged in the shape of a heart. The gravy spelled, you're cute in cursive. The bread rolls were suspiciously shaped like Marcel's nose. It was romantic and slightly yeasty. The castle staff grew curious. Why is the queen giggling at her plate? One asked. And why is Marcel carving poetry into potatoes? Another wondered. But Seraphina was clever. She claimed it was a culinary experiment in emotional seasoning. No one questioned it. The custard was very persuasive. One dish caused a stir. The forbidden flan. It jiggled suggestively and came with a scroll that read, My queen, your love is my recipe. Your smile, my spice. Your flan, slightly wobbly, but perfect. She cried, then ate it, then cried again. The flan was delicious. Eventually, Marcel was sent to write menus for a duke who preferred blandness. Seraphina kept the scroll, the flan mold, and a bread roll shaped like his nose. She hosted secret feasts in his honor, serving dishes like tender turnip tango and whispers in whipped cream. And somewhere, in a quiet kitchen, the custard still jiggles, the gravy still whispers, and love still simmers in forgotten flirts and flavorful dreams. In a castle where the moonlight curled through windows like sleepy ribbon, and the echoes of laughter lingered in velvet curtains, the queens gathered, not for war, not for politics, but for stories, soft ones, scandalous ones, sleepy ones. Queen Eleanor brought her poetry. Queen Isabella brought her whispering walls. Queen Margaret brought her chessboard. Queen Joan brought her sock. Queen Matilda brought her tapestry. Queen Adelaide brought Sir Fluff. Queen Beatrice brought onions. Queen Elspeth brought stars. Queen Isolde brought her lute. Queen Rosalind brought her cough. Queen Celestine brought her nap schedule. Queen Arabella brought gooseberries. Queen Sabina brought oats. Queen Mirabelle brought candles. Queen Honoria brought scrolls. Queen Isadora brought lemon juice. Queen Lavinia brought a goat. Queen Clementine brought her blanket fort. Queen Seraphina brought flan. They sat in a circle, sipping sleepy cider and nibbling on emotionally seasoned snacks. The goose wore a crown. The pigeon took notes. The goat hummed softly. One by one they shared their tales of secret glances, of coded snacks, of whispered dreams and velvet rebellions. They laughed. They sighed. They yawned in unison. Then Queen Eleanor stood and said, "Let us write it down. Not for history, not for fame, but for bedtime." And so they did. On parchment that smelled faintly of lavender and cheese, they wrote their stories. Each chapter a wink, each sentence a cuddle, each word a lullaby. When they finished, they tied the scroll with a ribbon made from Matilda's tapestry thread, sealed it with candle wax from Mirabelle's chamber, and placed it beneath the sleepy bookshelf. And somewhere, in a quiet castle, that scroll still rests, waiting to be read, waiting to be dreamed, waiting to wink one last time. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams be royal, your secrets gentle, and your bedtime stories always end with love. Good night.